The idea of coastal management is used to protect the coastline from the natural processes, to basically keep it there for humans and the environment, and to make sure that it is still something we can enjoy. Now, to look at coastal management, we've got two different approaches. We could use the ICZM, the Integrated Coastal Zone Management, or Shoreline Management Plans, SMPs, and you'll often see both being used together. For example, in the UK, we have an ICZM that is split into separate SMPs to make sure that we protect the coastline as a whole and to the best of our ability. Let's start looking at the ICZM. Now, this came about, first of all, in 1992, which was an excellent year, not only because the ICZM became a very popular used approach to coastal management, but also it was the year I was born. Now, what it means is it's coastal management planning over the long term. And it uses natural processes. It involves the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, that I should have said. So everybody that could possibly be involved, involves all stakeholders, uses natural processes. And it has what we call adaptive management. And what we mean by adaptive management, it means changing our plans as and when they are required. Changing plans as and when required. There we go. So that is our brief definition of what we mean by an ICZM. So, to carry on with it, why do we use it? Well, it manages the whole coastal zone. So which is pretty important when we are trying to think about our actual coastline. What we mean by that, it doesn't just include the area where the waves break. It talks about everything, all of the ecosystems and the human activity as well, all within that coastal zone. So from a little bit further out to sea, all the way back to land, not just where the waves break. So it looks at this holistic approach. Holistic meaning all together. And it's a holistic approach to shoreline management, or to coastline management, I should say. Now, what else? Well, it recognises that it must be sustainable. So what we mean by that is that economic development must be included. And it needs to occur, otherwise we can't improve the quality of life for people. There we go. And it must be environmentally appropriate, though. That's the key thing. So the idea is, in the UK, we use the ICZM with sediment cells. And our sediment cells then let us manage each different cell holistically. Okay, so we take our 11 sediment cells and we break them down. We look at then having 11 different ICZMs, essentially. We manage each of those cells holistically by themselves, and we can look at the whole idea as a whole as well. And this also allows the use of a shoreline management plan. To be used to manage each subsection. So that brings us on nicely to talking about shoreline management plans. The first thing we'll do is just bring this down so you can see the full bullet points there. They began in 1992, these ICZMs. Coastal management planning over the long term, involving every stakeholder, using natural processes and adaptive management, which means changing the plans as and when required in response to the different threats. If there's going to be a big storm coming, we're going to change that and adapt the plan to make sure that we're dealing with storms. Looking at the whole coastal zone, including ecosystems and human activity. Holistic, which means it's all together, and it must be sustainable, including development for people's economy to improve their quality of life, but that must be environmentally appropriate. And in the UK, we work as the sediment cells, and this allows each shoreline management plan to manage a subsection of these cells. So the shoreline management plans, this is just a strategy for one section of a coastline. Now, the easiest way to look at that is with a UK example using 11 different sediment cells. 11 of them. To have sub-cells. And what we mean by sub-cells is we break them down to manage individual areas. We break all of our different ideas, all of our different areas down. Our 11 sediment cells get broken into these sub-cells, looking at then protecting a certain area of the coast. Now, this needs cooperation between the local authorities, because these subsections could go across the different areas as well. So, for example, think all the way back to GCSE, we looked at Christchurch Bay, so Barton-on-Sea and Highcliffe, and we've got two completely different management options happening, with Highcliffe having large groins put in place and Barton-on-Sea having very small groins eventually put in place. Now, the reasoning behind that is that Highcliffe is in Dorset County Council and Barton-on-Sea is in Hampshire County Council. The two councils did not agree, and therefore the shoreline management plan was less effective than it could be, leading to the ongoing problems at Barton-on-Sea. So we need these local authorities, multiple councils, and different coastal groups to all be in agreement. And producing an SMP then involves appointing an expert group. Appointing expert groups. And these groups then monitor and assess the shoreline to come up and study, basically, using engineers to study and create a management policy. And this management policy is then what underpins the idea of protecting each of these shorelines. We can split this policy into smaller units, okay? Smaller management units, split into smaller management units to protect different and smaller areas of the coastline, to protect specific areas of the coastline in the cell. And then there are realistically 4 different ways that this shoreline management plan works. So we've got our ICZM. We know we're looking at our different areas. In fact, let's just get rid of that there. We've got 4 different ways that we can do this. I'm going to give you an example for each one. So, our ICZM protects our entire sediment cell. Our shoreline management plan is breaking down that cell and looking at different areas. And we can take 4 approaches using this. The first is that we do nothing. And doing nothing basically means letting the coastal processes take over. Just monitoring the coast, seeing what's happening, and actually not intervening. And a great example of this is the North Norfolk SMP. They have done nothing at Unit 3 in the North Norfolk SMP, and as a result, we see the coastline continuing to erode. But by intervening, they probably make it worse. The second option that we've got is usually the most common that we see, and the one that most people think should be happening, and that's called hold the line. Hold the line involves basically strengthening the sea defences and protecting the coastline. We are keeping that exactly where it is. We are protecting our coastline, and our example of that is Southsea. The Southsea Shoreline Management Plan, also called the Coastal Defence Scheme, that we keep going on about, they are holding the line and they are protecting the southern coast of Portsmouth. The third option we've got is called Advance the Line. And what that means is moving our defences seaward. So actually sticking them out in the sea to basically reclaim the land. And a great example of this happens in the Netherlands. The Netherlands does a lot of land reclamation, and we are doing it in certain areas of the UK as well. But the Netherlands is the best example of advancing this line and then strengthening their sea defences to claim that land back. And finally, the fourth thing we could do is we could either call it retreat the line, or the more common name for it is managed retreat. And this is where we basically sacrifice an area and move the defences backwards. Move defences, maybe not backwards, let's use the word landward. An example of this happened at Medmary in West Sussex. So what they did at Medmary was they breached the sea defences. They'd already built a new line further back, and they just let the sea wash in and flood an area to protect other areas around the coast. So there we have it, what we can do to make sure we are looking at our coastal management. The ICZM, looking at these whole coastal zones, breaking those ICZMs down into shoreline management plans to look at one specific section of the coastline, and then even breaking those down into smaller specific areas and taking one of these 4 approaches. What we're going to do on our Friday lesson, if you're watching this pretty much on the 1st of May or just after, we're going to start looking at Odisha. So please have a look through the resources that are up on Classroom, and we're going to recap Odisha and look at tying a 20 marker in to use both of these ideas there.